From Capitol Hill to a courthouse in Pennsylvania, it's been a week of reckoning in the Me Too era. What are we learning about the way we treat allegations of sexual assault? Congressman Duncan Hunter digs in. The East County Republican fires up his base and calls out the ancestry of his challenger. And though we're focused on November, San Diego is looking to a special election to deal with short-term rentals and the convention center. I'm Mark Sauer. The KPBS Roundtable starts now. Welcome to our discussion of the week's top stories. I'm Mark Sauer, and joining me at the KPBS Roundtable today, Sarah Libby, Managing Editor of The Voice of San Diego, KPBS reporter Jade Heidemann, Ken Stone, reporter with the Times of San Diego, and Lori Weisberg, who covers marketing and tourism for the San Diego Union Tribune. Well, it was one of the most extraordinary televised spectacles in the history of modern American government and politics. Brett Kavanaugh, Donald Trump's nominee to the Supreme Court, accused of attempted rape by psychology professor Christine Blasey Ford. Here's a snippet from the accuser and the accused.
I believed he was going to rape me. I tried to yell for help. When I did, Brett put his hand over my mouth to stop me from yelling. This is what terrified me the most and has had the most lasting impact on my life. It was hard for me to breathe, and I thought that Brett was accidentally going to kill me.
The day after the allegation appeared, I told this committee that I wanted a hearing as soon as possible to clear my name. I demanded a hearing for the very next day. Unfortunately, it took the committee 10 days to get to this hearing. In those 10 long days, as was predictable, and as I predicted, my family and my name have been totally and permanently destroyed.
All right, Sarah, incredible, disturbing hearing. Are we seeing the backlash of men against the Me Too movement brought into sharp relief?
I mean, it certainly called into focus the extent to which many men think that they are the true victims of this moment. And I think it really crystallized how men are still allowed to be really angry in public, whereas you heard from Dr. Ford being very polite and very accommodating. And it wasn't just Brett Kavanaugh who was very angry and had a lot of rage. You know, you saw it in Chuck Grassley and Lindsey Graham just being very defiant and angry. And if you think back a few weeks ago to the uproar over Serena Williams, I mean, it really puts a clear focus on who can be angry and how they're treated for that.
Yeah, Lindsey Graham, I mean, I didn't see that kind of reaction after 22 children were shot in Sandy Hook or in Parkland, Florida, et cetera. Jane?
I mean, it just seems, you know, in watching that Kavanaugh had an entire meltdown at that hearing. But it also shows why there are so many women that don't come forward with this. The skepticism that Ford has been put under is just a huge example of that.
Mm-hmm. Lori?
Well, yeah, and you keep hearing the mantra from many men and some on the committee and President Trump. Well, if this was such a big deal, why didn't she say something sooner? Why did she wait so long? And which then sparked its own movement that you saw on Twitter and social media, why I didn't report it right away, and to explain to men who don't understand the reasons why, and we've seen it play out. Maybe this is the reason why that kind of backlash you're talking about. Right,
we're going to get into more of that in a minute. Now, the Senate Judiciary Committee, that committee that held that extraordinary hearing, a little more collegial today, they did vote out Kavanaugh's nomination. That was a strict 11-10 party vote. One little caveat there, though. GOP Senator Jeff Flake, he wants a delay. He's talking about the FBI investigating, maybe a delay. Maybe it won't come early next week as was planned to the full floor of the Senate. Is this confirmation a done deal, Sarah?
I mean, I feel a little bit like after 2016, maybe we shouldn't be in the business of making predictions. If I had to guess, though, yes, I think it seems pretty clear that they're willing to confirm him.
The GOP wants to get that through. Jade?
To me, it seems like an FBI investigation would be an obvious thing. You have two people who are 100% sure about their account of what happened.
Both said that literally.
Exactly. Right. So you're only recourse, the only way that you can even somewhat get to the truth would be an FBI investigation. I'm not sure why this is running into such opposition. I don't understand that.
Right.
Well, I mean, I think in terms of predicting the outcome of the vote is one thing, but are you feeling, after you watch what we saw this morning, that there's confident that there will be an FBI investigation? Because I think what the White House is doing and what the Republican leadership is doing is counting votes on the floor, and they may not have those votes if they don't get the FBI investigation. Right.
I mean, if it's in the hands of Trump and Mitch McConnell, then I would lean toward no. But perhaps if they feel that's the only way that it's a certainty, then maybe.
All right. Now, I did want to make a point today. CNN reported today the National Rape and Sexual Abuse Hotline saw a 200% increase in reports during yesterday's hearing, which of course went on all day. And the story noted that typically when you get public attention focused on sexual abuse, you do see a spike. Do you see some women empowered coming forward because of this whole national attention on this?
Well, I think one thing that this case has demonstrated, as well as the Bill Cosby sentencing, is just how many credible women need to come forward in the case of a very powerful man in order for there to be consequences. And so I think, that's one thing that is an issue with the Kavanaugh appointment, is that Dr. Ford was very credible. She's, a white, educated woman, and yet it might not be enough.
And even Donald Trump today had a headline and a quote saying that she was credible, and it's up to the Senate now on more investigation. Ken?
Sarah, you're the political wonk. What is the consequence for Republicans who vote to confirm, even with a week's delay? It seems that Jeff Flake is trying to split the baby, saying, I'm on both sides. I'm on the accuser's side. I'm on the accused side. And even though he's not running for re-election, like-minded Republicans may take him up on that offer to push this off as a way of perhaps showing their constituents that on both sides that they are open-minded to the angry woman vote.
Yeah, does having it both ways, does that ever work?
Well, I mean, I think he won't have to face consequences from voters, but he might be thinking of a future in lobbying, as many ex-senators do, and perhaps doesn't want to anger his Republican
maybe running against
colleagues,
Trump in 2020.
For that. As far as people like Lisa Murkowski and Susan Collins, I think they really relish their roles as wild cards, and so it may not be a huge backlash for them, and they're who it all rests on.
All right, I did want to hear, we do have a soundbite here from President Trump. He's been accused of sexual impropriety by more than a dozen women. Of course, he bragged about assaulting women on the famous Hollywood Access tape during the campaign. Let's hear from the president on this idea of guilty until innocent regarding these claims.
When you are guilty until proven innocent, it's just not supposed to be that way. Always I heard, you're innocent until proven guilty. I've heard this for so long. And it's such a beautiful phrase. In this case, you're guilty until proven innocent. I think that is a very, very dangerous standard for our country.
All right. Now, I did want to bring up at that press conference that was at the UN in New York, he complained about 4 women. Typically, he did not have that accurate. It was more than a dozen who accused him. But he often promised during the campaign, I'm going to sue these women. I'm going to clear my name. I'm going to get the depositions. We'll get them under oath here and penalty of perjury here. No reporter asked him, Lori, about clearing his name. Why do you think that was?
I don't know if it's a case of been there, done that, and we just never took him seriously. That he makes these promises and boasts and then doesn't follow through. Maybe at this point is seen beside the point. I don't know, but you're right. No, nobody did press him on that.
I think reporters simply just have their hands full as far as the various claims he makes, and you have to sort of pick and choose which ones you pursue. At that same press conference, he said he won the women's vote, which is simply not true. He won white women, right. But he didn't. So you kind of just have to pick and choose which claims you're going to go after.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I was going to also make a point about Mr. Trump earlier on this week. He said if this was such a serious thing involving the alleged attack by Kavanaugh against Professor Ford, when they were teenagers, then she would have reported to the police at the time. Her loving parents would have stepped forward and come. That doesn't happen. We learned this week, didn't we, Ken?
Studies have found for decades that victims of sexual violence, especially young people, do not report for fear of parental anger and embarrassment, shame, and the proof in that is that the RAINN, RAINN, rape hotline is jumping off the hooks because of people finally finding the courage and will to make those complaints. So this is an indication that you cannot use that argument against her or any other sexual violence victim.
We talked earlier on about Kavanaugh, who came out swinging in his statement there, and he accused the left and the Democrats, revenge of the Clintons. It was quite a performance there, and there's been a lot of commentary on whether, as a job interview, which this confirmation is supposed to be, is that disqualifying simply from a measure of temperament for a judge? But before I end this segment, I did want to get back to Bill Cosby, which we mentioned early on, sentenced this week to 3 to 10 years in prison for drugging and sexually assaulting a woman. Scores of women accused Cosby over the years. Sarah, what impact do you think this conviction and Kavanaugh's confirmation hearing have maybe on the behavior of men and boys going forward in public and in private?
I think it's a bit of a mixed message. You know, though Bill Cosby was sentenced this week, it took decades for these victims to be believed, and only when they got a critical mass did anyone take it seriously. And then it's similar with Brett Kavanaugh. I think there's still somewhat of a message that if you're powerful and have a lot of resources behind you, that you're going to be treated differently than somebody who doesn't. All
right, we are going to leave this segment. Before we do, tell us about PolitiFest and Voice of San Diego sponsor.
Yeah, so Voice of San Diego is putting on PolitiFest on October 6th at USD, and we'll have a lot of great debates and a lot of rundowns about some of the decisions that people will be facing on the November ballot. So if you're looking to get kind of up to speed about the election that's coming up, it'll be a great way to do that, politifest.org.
Very good. All right, thank you. We are going to move on now to more politics. Republican Duncan Hunter faces felony federal charges, along with his wife, of using campaign funds on family vacations, school fees, dental work, bar bills, golf, ski outings, and many other things. $250,000 in campaign funds. The allegation is that they misused, and lying about it to cover tracks. Hunter continues his campaign for re-election in the 50th Congressional District, which includes East San Diego County. And hours after his latest appearance in federal court this week, Hunter addressed a Republican women's group making several bold charges against his opponent, Amar Kampa-Najjar. For one, Hunter seemed to claim the Democrat may be a Muslim terrorist. And Ken, you were at that, and there's an ad along those same lines here that we can talk about as well. So start with what Hunter is saying and what he said at that event that you were at.
Well, he did not explicitly say my opponent is a Muslim. He said my opponent changed his name several times, including once legally a week after the June primary to from the original birth name of Amar Yasser Najjar and to Amar Kampa-Najjar, which has been his usual name professionally in his adult life. Nobody ever knew him as Yasser. But contrary to Hunter's allegation that he was named after Yasser Arafat, the Palestinian terrorist and leader, in fact, Yasser was his dad's name. But in addition to that, the Hunter has been using his mother's surname Kampa for a while, and Hunter is trying to link Amar to his family lineage, which includes a grandfather who died was killed 16 years before he was born, who was an active member of Black September, who did not mastermind the Munich 72 Olympic attacks on the Israelis, but in fact, in a advertisement, a commercial that has not aired, I don't think, on TV, but has been shared on social media and his YouTube.
But he was involved. I mean, the grandfather was involved, even though he died long before.
But the commercial, which appeared 2 days after his Ramona appearance, and apparently Hunter was telegraphing or previewing this to his audience, the commercial explicitly says he's in the lineage of terrorists.
Right, and that was very clear if you see the ad. Jade, I wanted to get the response from Competent camp. Says this is a desperate ravings of a congressman, and you've interviewed him this week, and we're going to play a bite from that.
Right. I mean, he said that basically, you can't have a lawbreaker be a lawmaker. He's been very critical of Duncan Hunter, blaming his wife and his son for the allegations of misused campaign funds. He's also been critical, saying that the allegations are one thing, but the lack of accountability is another thing. And basically, the I guess, attacks on his heritage, on Amar Kemp-Najjar's heritage, is just an extension of that lack of accountability, he said.
All right, let's hear that soundbite then, and part of the response from him.
It's unfortunate that he's trying to fearmonger based on race. I think Hunter is looking at this district in a way that doesn't reflect the reality of our district. This district is changing. We're not backwards, bigoted, backwoods people. And I think, just like me, the people in my district who help raise me, educate me, mentor me, they will rise to the occasion.
All right, and Ken, I want to get back to the event you were at. Hunter is following President Trump's lead in going after immigrants at the event, and we're going to set up a soundbite here. What did he say generally?
Well, he said something that I hadn't heard before, that immigrants do not deserve to be here. I've never known that to be an issue, but in the course of saying that, he said, sorry if you were born in Africa, somewhere bad, or somewhere bad. Why don't you do what these men did during the colonial revolutionary period, which was fight for their own country? He basically said.
All right, we've got that bite. Let's hear it from that event.
Whether you were born in Africa or somewhere bad, why don't you do what these men did, what I did, and fight for your country? Why don't you try that on, instead of coming over here and getting welfare and food stamps from us, from people that have jobs and have worked 60 years of their lives? You don't deserve to come here.
Not a lot of sympathy there for refugees from horrible places. What did Hunter have to say about his legal jeopardy and the U.S. Justice Department?
Well, he did not specifically address the charges, but he sure had a head of steam going regarding the Justice Department. He called it corrupt. He said he's never seen so much corruption. He said we need to fight, and he repeated that several times. Basically, he's giving himself a pep talk in the course of discussing this with his audience. We need to fight, and he says that DOJ, if a person were put in federal lockup and he had a choice, he would believe the defendant over the actual charges.
The person in prison than the federal prison.
That's right.
Lori?
So it's kind of a tricky thing coming this election, because on the one hand, here you've got this candidate facing this indictment, and you think that'd be pretty tough to overcome, and yet he's in a district that's heavily Republican. I'm just curious, are the respective parties, given these different odds, are they dumping a lot of money into these respective campaigns, Republican and Democrats?
Well, the Kemp-Najjar campaign, which I guess has had over $1 million fed into it, not from PACs but from political institutions, agencies, has far outraised Hunter, and I think this is basically the one shot the Democrats think they'll ever have to unseating him, because a recent Monmouth University poll said that even if 40% of the registered voters in responding to a survey think Hunter is guilty or probably guilty, 1 out of 10 of those are going to vote for him anyway.
Wow. Jade, I want to give you the last word on this from Kemp-Najjar, and what's he saying he wants to do in this conservative district, if he's elected?
Well, he says he wants to focus on bringing jobs to the district. He said that an incentive in doing that and bringing those big corporations to the area may be to build on some of the Native American land. It would be a tax incentive for them. And so, he wants people to be able to work within the district instead of driving 45 minutes or so outside. But before we go on to the next subject, I do want to mention and talk about the tone and the white nationalist rhetoric that's coming out of the Hunter campaign right now. We've talked to experts, and they're definitely pointing that out. But and also he called Amar Campanajjar. He's linking him to terrorism.
A security risk.
Sure, he's security risk, and obviously there are people who make the same question about Duncan Hunter, being that he's got so many financial troubles. But even the security risk, though, is linked to this white national rhetoric that is coming out of the campaign, and I find it very interesting that this man is linking Amar Campanajjar to terrorism when you represent a district that has a whole town in it that is so notorious for terrorism that it's named Clay and T at this point. So I just think that you've really got to get a true idea of what's happening in this district and really kind of point out some of the dog whistles that are now becoming bullhorns.
A lot more coverage to come on that between now and Election Day. Fascinating race. Well, we turn now to another hot controversy, the battle over regulations governing short-term rentals in San Diego. Airbnb-type rentals have proved to be a complaint machine in some neighborhoods. For years, regulating them has vexed San Diego City Council members. Finally came up with a set of rules. Now those rules are on hold. And Lori, remind us, what were the rules and what happened this week?
Okay, yeah, and you're right. It took a really long time to get to those rules, but it's they're doing what you're seeing a number of other cities are starting to do as well. You can have short-term rentals, but only in the home you occupy, your residence, and up to 6 months out of the year while you're away, and that's it. So the effect is no more second homes, no investor properties that can be rented out for short-term rentals. So that would slash the number of rentals, and then that applies to Mission Beach too, which is full of short-term rentals.
And the opposition this week scored a victory, though. Everything is on hold.
Yeah,
right?
They quickly put out a referendum. They collected enough signatures, and the effect of a referendum, even before it goes before the voters, is it puts everything on hold. So now the big question mark is, for how long is everything on hold? Because the next election isn't until 2020, but there has been talk of a special election, which can be expensive, but for 2019. And there's some other fuel behind that, because waiting in the wings is a convention center initiative that has also qualified for a future ballot. So that's why you're hearing this talk, and it will be up to the mayor to push this before the city council to request a special election.
And who are the folks against what the city council did and those restrictions?
So it's a coalition. They call themselves Share San Diego. Not surprisingly, they're led by Airbnb, HomeAway, property management companies that do these short-term rentals, and then a number of the short-term rental hosts. Okay,
and so here we go again. Now this could, and in terms of the actual everything that was passed, that's just suspended. It was supposed to take effect next summer, right?
Yeah, you're right, and that includes paying like a $950 fee and registering, and then having these, ultimately in July, having these restrictions go into place. Now the people that are very upset about this referendum and want these rules to stay in place, they now go back and they're bringing up the city attorney's opinion that was issued last year, saying there's nothing in the municipal ordinance that regulates these short-term rentals, therefore they are illegal. The city has never enforced that, and now these people are calling on to the council and the city to enforce them. I don't think that's going to happen, but that's so now you're setting up this real division in the city.
How many of these rentals are we talking about? Do we know? It's always kind of a guesstimate.
Different third-party companies have estimated. They say as of last December, there was an estimate of about 11,000, which includes the renting out of a home while you're there in the home. But most of them are these whole home rentals. So it's a lot, and most of them are concentrated in the beach communities.
Okay, so might be a special election on this issue, as you mentioned, the convention center issue here. And before we're done today, I did want to get to this festering mess with the city's attempts to acquire property critical to the expansion of that downtown convention center. You wrote about that this week.
Right. So right now, the city does not have control over the bayfront, the bay side of the land that would be used for this convention center expansion. They worked out a deal to get control, but it was all premised on this measure that I was talking about, qualifying for this November's ballot. It didn't, so they have to redo the agreement. They have gotten to the point where they paid, the first term of that agreement was to pay a $5 million deposit, so they're going ahead with that, but then that has to set in motion negotiations to see, will they have to pay more? Originally it was going to be a total of $33 million. So the question is, will the developer, the owner of the leasehold, want more money to back off and not process? Like it's a $400 million hotel project that they want to do. They've been processing it.
Well, I'm told there's a little bit of news here just this morning, October 25th deadline on that $5 million. And does that make sense? A follow-up story for you?
Well, they already said that they're going to pay that money once the city council and the port take action in October.
Okay, so I guess that deadline
that's
is
the
referring
deadline
to
I think
that.
you're talking about.
That's
yeah.
the one that's come up this morning. So a lot to digest there. A couple seconds left. Special election is all get shoved off to 2020.
I have a feeling there's enough pressure to move for a special election because I don't think that the council, that the majority that supported these regulations, wants to keep them on hold that long.
Okay. Well, another one to watch
yeah.
here. All sorts of follow-up stuff. Full employment for us. We are out of time, so we're going to have to go. We'll hold those thoughts till next time. That does wrap up another week of stories at the KPBS Roundtable. And I'd like to thank my guests, Sarah Libby of Voice of San Diego, Jade Heidemann of KPBS News, Ken Stone of Times of San Diego, and Lori Weisberg of the San Diego Union Tribune. And a reminder, all the stories that we discussed today are available on our website, kpbs.org. I'm Mark Sauer. Thanks for joining us today on the Roundtable.